Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and a very warm welcome to Saturday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Your headlines today: Kiersey Clemons, who plays Iris West in the Flash movie, talks about the accusations thrown at Ezra Miller. She talks about James Gunn's comments about the Flash movie, calling it one of the best superheroes movies he's ever seen. And of course, she agrees with that. She said, despite everything that happened, the production was great fun and she enjoyed herself. Now, in the test screening I saw, Kiersey as Iris isn't in the movie that much. I'm not sure if that's changed there. In your other headlines, in the world of the DC Universe, James Gunn confirms that Batman will be a couple of years older than Superman in the DCU as well. Interesting, because we've been talking about this on our lives. You know, some people going up to 40 years old, which I never thought he would be. I thought he would be no older, Batman, in the DC Universe, than 30. James Gunn talks about a couple of years. He's kind of already confirmed that Superman's going to be around 25, maybe, he said. I think Superman will be around 23, 25. I think Superman may even be 23 in the new DC universe. It wouldn't surprise me. James Gunn again confirming that this is a really, really young Superman. So don't be surprised if he's 23 years old. And Batman is actually 25. And then obviously it's a bit of a difficult situation because he's supposed to have Damian Wayne as a son. So you'd have to take 11, 12 years. Is that possible? I don't know. I think I've predicted already that Batman will be 30 years old, but let's see. I'm still saying that Superman will be around 23 and 25. This is part of a 10-year plan, so they want Superman and Batman and the other heroes to be as young as possible so they don't grow out of their roles too quickly, because that's problematic, because then you'd have to change the actors, change your plans. So James has also said that Chapter 1 of DCU is actually more organised and more prepared than Phase 1 of the MCU. That's very, very interesting. How planned out was what Feige and those people were doing with Phase 1? Well, I don't think... I mean, it's interesting because they did start on the post-credit scenes. I think that was kind of an accident, and they saw that people liked them. So they carried them on. I think what happened was they started doing things and people started liking it. Now, for example, we had like the Samuel Jackson, Nick Fury cameo, I think, at the end of the first Iron Man. And then we saw a lot more of him and Scarlett Johansson in Iron Man 2. So I think there was a semblance of a plan, but not a complete plan. And I think James is right, that he and Peter have really planned things out. Of course, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You can have all the plans in the world and things change. I like the way he's talked about, no matter the schedules, they're not going to go out and start filming shit with an incomplete script. They're going to be doing this the right way. I do believe that James Gunn's heart and Peter Safran's hearts are in the right place. They're pretty fortunate in the way that they've seen the mismanagement of the other regimes managing the old DCEU, and they know they don't want to do that because they know they won't get away with doing that, and they want to create something special. They want to be remembered for reinvigorating the DCU, reinvigorating DC live action. I also believe, from what James Gunn is saying, that the changes in the Flash movie that will create a new timeline are more dramatic and, huger on the whole than what Wartime Arda was doing with his timeline changes. I think the way he's talking, this really is a new universe where you can use existing DCEU characters, but it really is a brand new time. He's also, a brand new universe, so a brand new time in a brand new universe. And I think he talks about, in this new world, he calls it a new world, there will be heroes already here, but Superman has only been Superman for a couple of years as well. So we've discussed the whole thing with the Justice League. He hasn't mentioned the Justice League. There's lots of us theorising about Justice League Dark, and we spoke about a couple of animated Justice League Dark kind of titles with Constantine in as well, that maybe people can watch to get a clue on what James Gunn's planning. Is he going to go for the Justice Society of America? Did the Justice Society of America used to exist? If you look at the Smallville DC universe, they did something very clever. They introduced the JSA in the movie event written by Jeff Johns, Absolute Justice. So historically, in the Smallville DC universe, DC characters already existed fighting a war, to uphold justice, like the JSA and Hawkman and Hawkgirl, Dr. Fate, and lots of different characters. So that was a really good thing. The best worlds have already got, the best fictional worlds have always got a bit of a history to them. So when you first see a Star Wars A New Hope, Obi-Wan talks about the Clone Wars. So there's a history there. It's what you call world building. I would expect the JSA to have been around prior to what's going on in this new timeline. So I do expect them to exist. I think one of the exciting things for me is what we're going to see with Batman. I think he's talked about building out the Bat family as well, which I find very, very interesting, if I'm being honest. So let's just go to Kiersey Clemens' comments. Very interesting, saying despite everything, she had a good time on the movie and it was a good set. I imagine it was a good set. But this film has had so many problems, and you can't deny what Ezra Miller's been accused of. You can't say it wasn't fair, which she said it wasn't fair, because to say it's not fair is to, try and say that the accusations against him are not true. And some of them are provable, and he's been arrested for them. Some of the others, there's not really evidence out there for. He's been accused by parents of certain things, and, there's a lot of accusations out there. He's just dug himself such holes. And it's not my business at the end of the day. My business is the film, the DC films. If they're any good, if I enjoyed them, what the directors, what the leaders in James Gunn and Peter Safran have to say, what they're moulding for the future, that's where my interest level is. At the end of the day, I'm not here to shine a moral torch at everyone. Of course, as an uncle, there's certain things I don't approve of. There's certain things that, the public shouldn't approve of, But at the end of the day, none of these things in terms of him doing this and that, and, the stuff that the parents accused him of has not been proven. So we don't know. He's been prosecuted for breaking and entering. He's been in trouble over causing trouble at karaoke. And really, in terms of a court of law, that's as far as it's gone with Ezra Miller. So as a DC fan, and as DC fans, I think, at the end of the day, we just have to move on from it and look forward to the film. This is the film from the 4 movies being released for DC this year that James Gunn has said, for James Gunn to say it's one of the best DC films he's ever seen. I'm going to have to take his word for it. I mean, I did see, as I said earlier, I did see a test screening. I think he's seen a completed movie. I didn't see a completed movie, but I did see some really good things in that movie. But you can never judge a test screening as a movie and say, it's a great movie. You can say, I like this, I like that. It looks promising. This doesn't look promising. It's interesting because when you think about the Black Adam test screenings, they really complemented the action, but not necessarily the characterizations. And I think the test audiences were right about that. Batgirl got better test screenings than Black Adam and Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom, which is also very interesting. Will that come to pass? Will that be true? We'll see. I think in terms of these movies, in terms of Shazam! Fury of the Gods, the interest in, as a company, WB and DC Studios want to make as much money as possible. Now, in terms of the Flash movie, that film, I don't think James Gunn gave David F. Sandberg any notes for that film, By the time James came on, I think that film was completed, and they didn't want him to unlock that film, and David confirmed that. So I think Shazam! Fury of the Gods doesn't see any changes from James Gunn because it doesn't need any changes from James Gunn. Do I think he gave notes to Blue Beetle? Yes, I do. Do I think he gave Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom some notes? Yes, I do. Because it has to look like there's some kind of change of universe. I don't know how they can do that. I don't know how we go... Because James Gunn has confirmed that there's wholesale changes in the timeline because of the Flash movie. And what happens? It creates a brand new timeline. A lot of things, most things will change, some things won't. That's pretty much what he said and how he's seen it. So what I'm saying is, because he's confirmed he gave, he gave Andy Muschietti some notes to go back and make some changes for the Flash movie. And I think we've discussed that already. That, they're cutting Michael Keaton out at the end, probably Sasha Calais, maybe Gal Gadot's cameo. And I think Gal Gadot was at the end of the movie originally. And Henry Cavill, I think, comes up at the end of the movie as well. So I think all those things have been cut out because, it would say if Gal Gadot isn't in that ending any longer, says something, it brings into doubt, her future in the DCU. And we're just going to have to wait and see how that works out. So he's confirmed he gave Andy Muschietti notes for the Flash movie. And he hasn't given any details, but there's lots of rumours out there, whether you believe them or not, that's up to you. I do believe a lot of the stuff that I've heard. But he hasn't really spoken about Blue Beetle, if he gave Blue Beetle any notes, or, as I say, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. But what I'm saying is, surely, if the Flash movie, makes all these changes, then, and if Blue Beetle is acting like, Blue Beetle was coming after, originally, Walter Hamada's change of timeline as well. So, now I remember one of the actors, I think a very famous comedy actor, saying that Batman is in Blue Beetle as a little cameo. So, what Batman is he talking about? And this is an interesting thing as well. Now, James says he doesn't do any casting until he's finished the script. So he's claiming he's nowhere near a Superman casting. That would say he's nowhere near a Batman casting. But I would like to talk about whether or not the new Superman will appear quickly in the Flash movie. If the new Batman will appear quickly in the new Flash movie. Or considering they were talking about a Batman cameo in Blue Beetle, and clearly that was Michael Keaton because that was going to be Walter Hamada's brand new timeline Batman. We know that. So clearly Michael Keaton was going to cameo in that movie. Clearly, he cannot cameo anymore. Now, when Abdi and DeLuca took over DC, at the same time they took over Warner Brothers Pictures, Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdi, there was these lots of rumours surrounding Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. We had kind of Jason Momoa having a selfie with Ben Affleck, and everyone took the assumption that Ben Affleck was going to be in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. And I think this is prior to James Gunn arriving. Then Jason started saying, well, maybe it's just one Batman or maybe more than one Batman are in this movie. So I think what he was talking about is continuing Ben Affleck's Batfleck, being stuck in this kind of Elseworld universe and him trying to ask for help like he does to Barry at the end of the Flash movie. Of course, all that's been cut now because they're not doing Final Crisis like they were originally going to do, which would have been an interesting element. I think that's what Walter was trying to do. Have the Snyderverse, have his new timeline fight together against the new gods, and then it kind of becomes the new timeline altogether. And, either the Snyderverse characters go away. I don't know how they were going to do it, but they're not doing that anymore. So, considering, I think, when Abdi and DeLuca came in, that it looked like Keaton and Affleck would both cameo, I would say in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, for me, it says that originally, in terms of what Abdi and DeLuca were doing, they weren't going to cut out Keaton or any of the others at the end of the Flash movie. And I think they wanted to keep Keaton as a kind of cameo, kind of Sam L. Jackson kind of thing, like the MCU used to do, and have Ben Affleck with these post-credit scenes asking for help to be broken free out of this kind of bottled universe, elseworld, multiverse, whatever you want to call it, because they were doing Final Crisis. So I think they were still going with that, and they were heavily going to keep on, using. It's clearly Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck, and Michael Keaton for now was going to be the main Batman until the Final Crisis situation. I think after Final Crisis, maybe a new timeline would have been born out of that. Then they would have cast a new Batman. Then they would have cast a new Superman. And maybe this is what they were looking to do. Very, very interesting stuff that we'll never know about. And believe you me, I kind of want to know what Hamada was planning with Final Crisis. And I do ask people, and I do ask my sources inside of the studio, a lot of them who used to be inside of the studio. There's been a lot of wholesale changes at WB. So, the information we used to get out of there is not so much now. I think for all scoopers, I'm not a scooper, but I am privy to certain things that happen to the industry. I need to, because I do this channel. I love doing this channel. I'm a movie fan. I'm an entertainment fan. I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. And I love this shit, and I like to know what's going on. So I would one day like to know what happened with all of that. So what we can assume now with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which I did see a cut of, I did see a test screening of, and I kind of enjoyed the movie. I think lots of people have got different opinions if that movie's going to be any good, and I think if people don't like Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, there will be some blame put into allowing Jason Momoa to co-write this story. So it'd be interesting what people's reaction to Jason, building up the story of this film, and there's a lot of real-world commentary in this film, thanks to what Jason wanted to do, because Jason's an environmentalist and he's very passionate about the environment, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. So I think it'll be interesting who turns up in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, because that will be after Blue. That's after Blue Beetle. That's the final DC movie of this year. Will they introduce the new Batman in there? Will they make it blatantly obvious that this is the new DC universe? Or will they just carry on as they were going to do before, hoping nobody really notices that it doesn't seem like we're in a new universe? I think that there'll be relevant changes for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I think James and Peter would have given some notes to James Wan. And I think the same with the Blue Beetle. I don't know if it's director or directors. I think it's director. Is it Luis Manuel Soto? I think did that film. I don't think I know. I follow him on Instagram. Great guy. Can't wait to see his movie. So I think they will make some relevant changes to these movies, apart from Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which has no effect. The beautiful thing that David F. Sandberg has had with this movie is that movie isn't affected by the new timeline. It's prior to the Flash movie. So, David could tell his story. So this film has been unharmed. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I mean, sometimes when you change films, like they're doing with The Flash, so it kind of all fits in with what James and Peter are doing, that can kind of harm a film or it can improve a film. But they're not making these changes in the Flash movie to improve the film. It's not about the quality. It's about so it fits in to what they want to do. So, he has given notes, James Gunn, for the Flash movie, and the changes in the timeline will be bigger and more dramatic than they were going to be originally. So you can absolutely bet your bottom dollar about that. And so, so I think that's important to understand. I don't think we're going to see Ben Affleck. I mean, look, it's clear you can't see Ben Affleck in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom any longer. It's clear that maybe he was going to be in it somehow. And I think the way I predicted it with Final Crisis and him being trapped and somehow getting a message to Aquaman like he did to Barry Allen, The Flash, I think that's what we were going to see. And then Michael Keaton, like in that timeline before, was going to be the main Batman for now until they were dealing with Final Crisis. And what would have been exciting about Final Crisis is I think we would have had Keaton and Affleck on screen together, because from what I saw in the Flash movie, you don't get Keaton and Affleck on screen together. Now, I don't know if they did something different after I watched the test screening. I don't think so. And I think that Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck have confirmed they didn't get any screen time together. But I think in Final Crisis, this was the idea. It's like an end game. You know, in Infinity War, it was supposed to join all these multiversal versions of these characters together, then reset the timeline again properly, new Batman, new Superman. So they were really going to do a really good goodbye to the Snyderverse and the DCEU. So I think that Hamada was probably on the right track, and Final Crisis would have been really awesome. And it's clear that Snyder had absolute knowledge about Final Crisis way before we did, because he started hinting about it. But I think Zack's not the kind of guy to start leaking stuff. So I think there would have been a good chance of Zack Snyder directing Final Crisis. And if that's true, I think it's a big shame that Zack Snyder doesn't get to direct a Final Crisis film, because I think that was the plan, to give Zack Snyder his farewell with DC. And I think if Snyderverse stands got that final farewell, and Zack directing a Final Crisis movie where he gets to direct the new timeline characters, the old timeline characters, then probably the old timeline characters die, and this resets the universe properly. And as I say, they cast a new Batman and a new Superman. And, I think that was the compromise that Walter Hamada was attempting to reach. I think it was like, okay, Zack, do this one film. I can't give you Justice League 2 and 3. I can't allow you to finish your arc. But you can kind of put some things to finish your arc in this one movie, Final Crisis. And I think that was the idea from Walter Hamada. And I think that's what Walter wanted to do. And I think what James and Peter have done have probably said, you know what? We just want to start the way we mean to go on. We need to start afresh as much as humanly possible. So we're going to come in. We're going to use the Flash movie, as Walter was doing, to, incite a new timeline, but a dramatically different timeline from what we've had since 2013. And the changes, I think, are going to be huger. It's obvious for sure. We're getting a new Batman and Superman. There's no question about that. He's talking about Batman being a couple of years older than a younger Superman. So it's clear. I did have a little 10% kind of theory that Affleck would continue as Batman. Who knows? Who knows what he could do? I mean, I think it's a very interesting situation. Actually, just finish off that conversation. But yeah, I did, I just started talking about Ben Affleck. I just lost myself for a minute there. But yeah, I was talking about Ben Affleck, and I think it's interesting if, that he said they've been looking at something for Ben to direct at DC. Now, I made the assumption that maybe he would get him to direct the Brave and the Bold Batman movie. But as I've been talking to you, I've had another idea and thought about the DC Elseworlds part of this franchise now. And think about this. The other day he said you'd have to reach a high bar to get a DC Elseworlds movie. And of course, they're running that as well. Now, I don't think James will directly be involved with the DC Elseworlds, because I think he knows his limitations, and what he's doing over there is what he's focusing on. I think his idea with DC Elseworlds is to do what Warner Brothers already did and what Walter already did, bringing in people like Matt Reeves and bringing in people like Todd Phillips to do things like Joker and the Batman. So already the bar's set so high because, the bar's set so high because Todd Phillips and Matt Reeves are exceptional filmmakers. They're exceptional auteurs. And the quality of both the movies we've seen in the DC Elseworlds thus far has been exceptional. Now, we've been talking about Ta-Nehisi Coates in other videos and other lives, and his Superman movie and J.J. Abrams' Superman movie still being in active development. And there's a chance that that could be a really well-made, exceptional movie, even though I don't like the idea in an Elseworlds that there's a black Clark Kent. But as long as they don't replace, they don't delete white Clark Kent to have a black Clark Kent, I'm fine. Tell your story, because this is supposed to be set in the 90s. It's something different. Ta-Nehisi Coates could be telling a very interesting, compelling story. So let's see if that happens. But going back to Ben Affleck, it could be that he finally gets to tell the Batman movie, his story, the movie where he goes up against Deathstroke. It could be that Ben Affleck gets to write and direct and star in his own Batman movie, or write and direct his own Batman movie in DC Elseworlds that has nothing to do with the Snyderverse, which will trigger some Snyder fans, but it doesn't take much to trigger those fans anyway. And it's like every time they speak, you've got to put your blinkers on and your headphones on because they're just so angry and they can't contain their anger anymore. What's happened has happened. I think what James and Peter are doing is very good. The noises they're making are very good, and what they're setting out is a much better future for DC. You know, in terms of movies, television, animation, and gaming. They're talking about gaming. It's something that we want. So when people say to you, the slate announcement, right? The first part of, you know, chapter 1 of chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, and that slate, and people saying to you, well, it's very mid and it's underwhelming. You know, if you see red flags with the writing team he's picked, you know, like people like Christina Hodson and people like the Watchmen series writer, I can understand why you're concerned, but at the same time, he's also chosen a Daredevil writer as well, so that's very interesting. A Daredevil, one of the people who developed Daredevil on Netflix, not who's developing the Daredevil on Disney Plus, which they're actually appointed a few CW Arrowverse writers to be involved in that. So good luck with that. Talking about failing downwards, but I do feel that, yeah, a lot of fans, I think, are noticing that the DC Elseworlds will bring vast opportunities. Now, is it Tyrone Magnus, who's got a YouTube channel, did ask a very fair question to James Gunn. Considering you're doing DC Elseworlds, why can't Zack Snyder finish his universe over there? So I don't know if James Gunn would be open to that, but I think the problem is when the fans of Zack Snyder, and you know, I don't blame Zack for what his fans do, and you can't expect him every time some idiot says something, you know, to shout them down. They've been very supportive to him. He needs them. So he's not going to do that, and I don't blame him for that. But some of the Snyder fans, and not all of them, have been very brutal to, you know, to James Gunn, calling him things and accusing him of things that have never been proven. And that's the problem. So what you're doing is here, you're creating an enemy. You know, you think he's your enemy because he removed Henry Cavill, but then you're quite fine with the fact that Zack Snyder ignored a petition of 1 million people to keep Brandon Routh as Superman. I agree with Brandon Routh not being brought in to be Zack Snyder's Superman in Man of Steel and beyond. I agree with that decision, even though I think Brandon was great as Clark and as Superman. I think he would have been great in MOS, just as great as Henry. But I agree that everyone wants to work with their own people. I also agree, you know, even though I was very angry with James Gunn over Henry Cavill at first, but then I thought about it logically, and I kind of thought to myself, you know what, this is the right decision. And when you hear James's reasoning, even though I love Henry and I'm gutted for Henry personally, on a human level, I can understand why James has made the decision, and I don't feel it's a decision, you know, that needs me to continue to be toxic. Now, at first, I was being very toxic. I was saying, hang on a minute, James is still employing his wife, his friend, that's not fair. But at the end of the day, if I was in his position, I'd be employing my wife. I don't have a wife, but if I had a wife, I'd be employing her. Because at the end of the day, you know, I think she's a very good actor. And I think, you know, with, I forgot her character's name, is it Amelia? Amelia Harcourt. I think a couple of her performances have been really, really strong, and she's, look, not necessarily a character that I needed. And obviously he created the character to give her a job. And some people may see that as, you know, nepotism. I mean, there's a lot of nepotism in Hollywood, but at the end of the day, it doesn't hurt anything, you know. She didn't replace Henry Cavill. She would have had a job whether Henry's there or not. Do you get what I mean? Now, in terms, and then obviously there's the attacks on him because Ezra Miller still seems to have a job, and they said, you know, there's a chance for Ezra to continue in the role. I don't think that there is, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. And people think that's outrageous. You know, Amber Heard and Ezra Miller keeping their jobs while Henry Cavill loses his. Yeah, I mean, on the face of it, it isn't a good look, is it? But they didn't want to go with Henry Cavill for Superman, to continue him as Superman. And I understand why, and I understand their reasons, even though it's unfair. And that James is correct, that he was dicked around. And that's a shame, but that doesn't mean that James needs to be charitable and keep him as Superman. And obviously, when you think about the Ezra Miller situation and the Amber Heard situation, it does seem rather unfair. And I understand why people aren't happy about it. But I don't believe Amber Heard will remain as Mira. I think they'll just kind of phase her out. You probably won't even get an official cancellation of her character, but the changes he's going to make won't make it possible to come back. She won't come back. And eventually, when they start developing Aquaman as a new DCU character, you will have a new Mira. I can guarantee you of that. You'll have a new actor playing Batgirl and things like that. In terms of Ezra Miller, I don't see him being involved after this movie, but things in show business are very strange and very funny, because and in business in general, if that film, let's just say by some miraculous, fantastic miracle, the Flash movie does Spider-Man No Way Home money or Top Gun Maverick money, you know, they're going to be considering bringing him back because he's been in the movie that's been very, very successful. They definitely bring Andy Muschietti back. So it's a complicated situation with Ezra. I don't think it's a complicated one with Amber. I do feel that she has got maybe some power over some of the people who were there originally, and that's how she kept her job. Walter Hamada, to be fair to him, did try and remove her. He really, really did. And when you see like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard court case, you can see that Walter tried everything to remove her, and it didn't work because he had to be careful, because he couldn't just outright get rid of her, because she could just, she could take some wrongful dismissal thing out on him, because just because someone is horrible to their partner, it doesn't mean you can remove them. So I think that was the problem that he had. He knew she was problematic, maybe not in terms of her relationship with her cast and her director, but in terms of bad for business, because people would boycott the picture because of her. I don't think she's a problem when you're working with her. I don't know if she is. Maybe she is. I don't know. So I think that's why Walter attempted to get rid of her. And so credit to Walter Hamada. He tried his best to get rid of that problem. But Amber is very ambitious and very clever. And when she wants something, she gets it. And that's where we are with that. So I don't think it's fair to outrightly say to James Gunn, oh, you kept Amber, you kept Ezra, but you got rid of Henry. There's creative decisions why he didn't continue with Henry. And I think ultimately Amber Heard won't be Mira in the future in the new DC universe, and it is a new DC universe, and I don't think Ezra Miller will be the Flash in the end, unless the movie makes so much money and they have no choice to continue with him. I'm open to all things, because I just want DC to be the best that it can be. This has been Saturday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wife. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection, and I'll see you again in the next video. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.